So today's book is Dying for Attention, a graphic memoir of nursing home care. Well, I wanted to make sure that we cover everything that we can, and I thought maybe a place to start is to let you, whatever you want to say about the book as an introduction.
Um, okay, thank you. The book was, I want to say, a labor of love, and I guess I mean that in the very broadest sense that love can mean. I had to dig deep, and I'm not even sure if I dug as deep as I could go, but at the time I did. Uh, I knew that being with my mother in a nursing home environment was almost traumatic, and I could see that the elderly are not well cared for in at least the long-term care system in my province, which is Nova Scotia, and it's not well funded. And there's no national, although they are developing now national long-term standards. At their time, there weren't any, and it was all budget driven. So I knew the way my mother was cared for wasn't right.
Go over to the book, and I don't know if page 64 is one that really you feel is a standout, or it's just another page among so many, but it's I think a wonderful jumping off point. I'll read a little bit of it. What I like about it are all the little touches, which I like. I want to go into how you use the techniques of sketchnoting and comics. There's so much we can chat about. Now, this I think just gives you a nice flavor of the milieu of a nursing home and the incompetence and the obstacles. Over Christmas, Mom seemed tense and quiet after her new assisted living home. Mom, here's your sherry, Mom. And then it goes on where the assistants don't seem to be exactly zoned in with the best of care. Is, is,
No.
is this a page that strikes some thoughts that you might want to share about the process of you making a
Uh,
comics page?
Sure. Well, I have to begin by saying that when I knew nothing about making comics, and every page I made felt like I was stepping off a cliff. So when I went through the Master of Fine Arts program here at King's for creative nonfiction, and that program helped me develop a narrative arc, if you will, and the chapter content. Each chapter was laid out in words. But what I had coming out of that program was actually more like a children's book. It was like text and illustrated text. And then I went to the Center for Cartoon Studies in Vermont for about 10 days. And I took a graphic novel course there from Paul Karasek. And he's a New Yorker cartoonist. And anyway, he's a great cartoonist.
Yeah.
And he was, yeah, very insistent. He said, Susan, you got to put this into panels. So he's where I actually learned how to make a graphic novel. And he said, just put it into panels. And so I took to calling him Panel Paul. And sort of before I had met him, I was looking at all kinds of graphic memoirs and graphic novels, and I was thinking how beautiful they were. And I wanted to make beautiful art, but I just couldn't. I didn't, for a book length project, I didn't have the energy, you know?
Mhm.
And so in the end, I just threw up my hands and said, do what people are telling you to do. Just draw and put it into panels. So the drawings are what came out of my pen. And I read in your view about uh, what's simple drawing and, you know, what's beautiful art. And I understand that my drawings are very simple, and I wish that they could be more sophisticated and more beautiful, but uh, in the end, I trusted what was coming out the nib of my pen, and this is the best I could do to tell stories. And Yes, so it's very direct in that sense, in that I don't have a lot of training in comic arts. I have a fine arts degree, but that was mostly in painting. Um, and at that time, taking fine arts, drawing, that was in the 90s, and they didn't care about drawing. Drawing was a lesser art, and my strength is in drawing. So I didn't get much in the way of drawing training because that was, I don't know, too female or something, or, you know, watercolor was not looked upon as a very sophisticated medium. But so I ended up with a degree in painting, but it wasn't exactly my forte.
Well,
Yeah, so,
they want to get
sorry.
you, they want to get you into studios and start doing your work. They just want to
Yes.
let you loose with what you know. I know that because I went through a similar background. I have a degree in fine arts painting. I also studied creative writing. And so the thing is, you really do have the training for doing this kind of work. And maybe
Yeah, I just,
I think you're very, very, very honest and modest because what you're doing is really what a lot of the so-called name cartoonists are doing. And not that there's anything wrong with being a name cartoonist. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that there's a different attention put on certain creators who invest their energies in a certain way, position themselves in a certain way. And it's very natural for them. Let's say they've always been cartoonists. They go to conventions. They identify as cartoonists, et cetera, et cetera. Other people, they come at it from a different place, from a fine arts place, and then
yeah.
they become known for their work as cartoonists. So it all ends up being basically you're right there now, shoulder to shoulder with other cartoonists. That's
Oh, well,
that's
thank you.
that's the way to look at it. And as I say in my review, you have there's like touches of James Thurber, John Porcellino, and
Oh, both of them I love.
some people will say, well, with James Thurber, those are very simple, crude uh, drawings, and other people will look at them and say they're masterpieces. We've seen them so many times they've become iconic. So it's all a matter of perception and who's in charge of the narrative.
Yes, and I appreciate you saying that because, well, thank you. And also, I think I was very lonely writing this book because the MFA program, I was the only person doing a graphic memoir, and it was very generous of them to include me in the program almost. And but I grew up, my native instinct was always towards cartoons. And in my family, we love New Yorker cartoons. And my dad, who had no background in art at all, you know, we came from kind of a lower middle class background, so he didn't even get to university, but he always doodled, and they were always very cartoony. And he loved James Thurber, and he loved New Yorker cartoonists, and he loved James Pfeiffer, you know, all those the cartoons of that age, of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and he perhaps even earlier, because he was a young man in the 40s. So he introduced me to all those. But beyond that, there was nothing in my environment that gave me confidence or that made me feel I belonged in that world. It was, yeah, because art school looked down on illustration. Yeah, so I didn't belong, and I didn't have the confidence. So it's nice to feel I belong now.
You absolutely do belong. And so I wonder, are you planning on doing more comics work? Are you doing more of this type of work?
I am still afraid. Every time I go into the studio, it takes a lot to overcome that fear, but I am doing them. I'm submitting to different magazines, but mostly they're adaptations from the book right now. I have a whole box full of cartooning ideas, And I'm hoping this summer I get to them, because right now I feel like I'm still in the mode of doing book promotion.
Yeah.
But once that's done, I want to be brave again and go through all those cartoon ideas and start submitting them different places. I don't know if there's another book in me, but I want to, I got a Canada Council grant to write this book. So there's another kind of Canada Council grant I want to look at for, I haven't really landed on a project yet, but it's sort of about communicating around the end of life using cartoons, and communicating in nursing homes using cartoons as a different, more direct way to communicate. So there's some loose ideas of projects around cartooning, not necessarily in book form. I don't know.
How familiar are you with the world of graphic recording, of standing up in front of people, or Zoom and doing the drawings during a meeting or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I am a graphic recorder and I do that. And of course, the pandemic put a stop to most of that, but I have a few gigs coming up and I'm learning how to do digital graphic recording on an iPad using Procreate. So I'm learning that. Yeah, and I do go into nursing homes, which is very interesting, when
Yeah.
pandemic allows. I go in with a local historian and she tells something that an event or the history of a location around here, and of course Nova Scotia is rife with history, and usually it's something that the residents are familiar with, and I draw it while she's telling the story, and the residents love that. And at the end of the session, I always leave space on the paper for their own memories, and I draw that too, and then the home hangs it up at wheelchair level, and people kind of come and talk about it. And we one nursing home did a survey and we came third in popularity behind music and bingo, and I think, well, you can't beat those two. So I felt very proud. So I think there's lots of space in nursing homes for using visuals in a more helpful way, not just for recreation activities, but perhaps for families to communicate with staff in an easy way. So those are things I'm beginning to investigate as future projects.
Well, yeah, that is well, very well said, because you're doing graphic recording, but you're also doing some graphic facilitation because you have the people participating in the actual
Yes,
thing that you're doing.
yeah. It's hard to do both because your face is to the paper, but yes,
Well,
yeah, definitely.
I want to point out to folks, when I'm talking about sketchnoting, little elements like this banner are very much part of the graphic recording world, and that's because it's an easy way to capture something. You want to capture the person, the speaker, or the subject, or whatever. So that is very handy. The world of graphic recording is about connecting containers, synthesizing, emphasizing, getting to the bottom of what is it that people have gathered to try to figure out. So you definitely know about that, and you bring that into your book, which is great.
Yes, definitely.
Not everyone can do this, so you got a very special skill. And I think that there is an art to sketchnoting, and some special folks can make an art out of sketchnoting, because the sketchnoting world will say, no, it's just utilitarian. It's not an art, as if there was something suspect about art. And so it just roils me. Or it's a pet peeve of mine. I want to let people know that doodling is for everyone. Sure, but it can be an art form if you take it to another level. If you do certain things like a comic, I think it really comes out in a comic, using elements of sketchnoting, simple direct drawings. All of that adds up So there's nothing wrong with simplicity and clarity. So I think,
No,
I
in
hope I
fact,
made,
yeah,
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
I hope I made that clear. It may take more than just one review, or I keep bringing it up as often as I can. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that,
Yeah,
the so I think one of the key talents of or skills in graphic recording is the listening. Um, and you're probably the only person in the room who's actually heard all that's being said. So you're the one who's paying the closest attention. And that's what I called my book. It's, dying for attention,
yes,
because there's so many levels on which we don't pay attention to each other. And in this case, my focus is on the elderly. So someone compared graphic recording once to the same as American Sign Language, that interpretation. And I think that might be whatever's going on in the makeup of the brain of a graphic recorder, is that ability to hear something and then transform it or translate it into another form for the sake of communications. But definitely in real time, but definitely simplicity is what communicates, regardless of whether it's words or whether it's drawings.
oh
And,
yeah,
and my
exactly.
career was in communications, so I'm quite familiar with that. Yeah,
Exactly. It begins with listening.
it all begins with paying attention. And I think Sally Tisdale is somewhere in the book says, the way we communicate by speech is the second level of communication. And the first level of communications, I'm not sure if I'm understanding her correctly, but what I understood it to be is at some gut level, at some emotional level. That's the first level. And the second level is the speech. And we can't really understand another person fully through speech, if you will. So I think drawing helps immensely in communicating what's being said in an unspoken realm, if you will.
Yeah, it's been said so many times that it takes a person maybe 3 times before they actually hear or understand what you were saying, or really
Yeah.
clue into everything that you had to say.
Yes, exactly. We're not good listeners. So yeah, and we're not often present. So yeah.
Now, your book, you show me, has a lot of post-its in it. Is there something that you'd like to bring out about what you learned about the nursing home world and taking care of your mom? Or
Yeah. Well, I think that first page, for instance, that you highlighted, page 63, I was thinking about that, and that's an interesting page, because that, or 61, I forget where it was. Anyway,
I was on 64.
64, sorry, yes. So one thing I learned was how our economy, this, I think, in some levels, this ageism and this neglect starts with the economy. So the home that Mom was in page 64 was a for-profit home. And there has been some research showing that not every for-profit home, but generally, when you're delivering care and you have a bottom line, a monetary bottom line, it compromises the care that's given, and the least accountability goes to the quality of care, and it's about budget efficiency. And so that's why in it's so hard in a for-profit home to get the kind of labor that you need to fully pay attention to someone who is experiencing comorbidities, as they call them, multiple, because everyone who's elderly has many, many conditions that are declining. So the LPM, the thing here is that the LPN didn't know enough about geriatric medicine to see for herself that mom's symptoms were the symptoms of someone in great pain.
Yeah.
And took a geriatric nurse practitioner, someone much better qualified, but at the same time, much more expensive, to understand that nuance and to get her to the care she needed. So I guess that's one thread that I'm even investigating now. Personally, I'm reading a book by an economist, Mark Carney, and it's a difficult book because I don't think it's written for lay people, but it's called Values. And he is trying to distinguish between a market society and a market economy. So a market economy is great. That's where, you know, the private sector and the public sector work together, and the market has a role and the public sector has a role. But a market society is something in which anything that's valued is only valued by its price, as opposed to whatever intrinsic value it might have, such as caregiving. So anyway, I'm only halfway through the book, but that's one thing I was thinking about when reading the book. And I have more information now from having started this book on economics, but I did quote Tara Henley here somewhere towards the back of the book, that until the values of our economy change from simple monetary or trade exchanges to valuing human life, our systems won't change. So that, I find that interesting.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah.
You say it better than I can. I don't know. There's nothing else I can add to that. I wanted to I want to make sure that if there's any other points you want to bring out, because I can go off into tangents. I wanted to talk maybe a little bit about how the book came together, because it's one thing to create the book, it's another to get it out into the world. And I'm thinking about the network, the communities of support that you created, and you've got all these wonderful people providing testimonials: Robin Duke, Rebecca Rower, Sarah Levitt, Colleen Isaac.
Yeah. Oh, that was just great good fortune. I think Robin Duke was in the same MFA program I was in, so I got to know her there.
Oh.
And yeah, so I think she has a book in the works, and we were in the same cohort, so that was great. Rebecca Rohr was the mentor that the school provided for me, the MFA program, as I was working through. She contributed more in terms of the visual storytelling as opposed to the layout. As I say, it was only when I got to Paul Karasak that I understood the formatting. So that was fine. So she was a great help. Sarah Levitt, I met through the graphic medicine community, which I've gone to I've gone to several conferences, and I've been with them almost since the beginning, as you know, as a participant, if you will, although I have given a couple of presentations. Sarah Levitt's book Tangles was the first book I read that was of graphic medicine, and it was about looking after her mother as she declined into early onset Alzheimer's, I think. And it was just so riveting and so moving, and I learned so much that was definitely an inspiration. Ross Chaz, who I don't know, her book, Can't We Talk About Something More Pleasant, was really good. And that inspired me to make it funny. You know, you can make this really tough subject funny.
Yeah.
But in terms of getting it to a publisher, it was definitely the MFA program, because their program was all about getting published. So we came out of there with a book proposal.
So you were saying that your MFA program, part of it was having a book proposal, and the Conundrum Press was so pleased because you had done a lot of the work ahead of time for the publisher. And I guess
Yes.
that's a nugget of wisdom for a lot of folks, especially if you want to do a graphic novel. I guess it could apply to anything, any kind of book. But if you actually create a graphic novel on your own and then propose it, the likelihood of it getting published becomes much higher because they see what the book is. If you just provide a proposal with a few pages, they're wondering, where is this book heading? Or it might become a game where it's too many cooks in the pot. I think. Don't you think something to be said for that?
Oh, I totally agree. So you don't have to have drawn the whole book, but you have to have the whole book in outline. Like I
Yeah.
had all 13 chapters in with a summary of what was going on in each chapter, so it was clear what the arc was and where the book was going. And the 2 finished chapters gave him the sense that I could draw chapters, that I could take, so that was, yeah, the more you can do, particularly for, I would think, graphic novels and graphic memoirs, where the publishers are all small and very indie, and they don't have a great deal of resources, so they can't hold your hand. So the more you can do for them, and the same with promotion, there's not a whole lot they can do for you in terms of promotion. So you got to do a lot of legwork and beating the bushes yourself. So I would give it a good decade from beginning to end, all things considered. I think for me it's going into its perhaps 8th year, if you will, from the time I sat on my deck and said, this is something big, I want to draw this, to today. I think it's about 8 years.
Yeah. Well, time passes by quickly, or it can. Yeah, from the very, very beginning to the end, it might be a decade easily. And yeah, that's good advice. You don't have to necessarily do the whole book. I did, and I got it published. And I will talk about that in future posts because I don't want to bring it up just yet. But it worked for me. If you have that, if it just depends. Every project's different, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and the more you can show them your competence, that's the better, for sure.
Well, I love what you shared about the nursing home experience and your mom and that wonderful call bell metaphor. It's a metaphor and it's a reality. It's just something you might want to just and closing out, because you even have the call bell, which is a symbol for so many things, that break down a communication at the very end, where your mom is no longer a cartoon character, but you draw her in a semi-realistic style, and her hand, it seems like it's still holding that call bell, trying to get that attention she needs.
Yeah. So, obviously that was, as she was dying, that was a very difficult time. I think it was about 10 days in all. And we were sitting vigil, and one of the ways I was coping was to sketch. And that's one of the ways I cope with anything almost. So when it came to the book, I realized they were sketches that would have resonance in the book. So it was a natural fit, although at the time that wasn't a purposeful drawing. It was more, how can I process what is happening in front of me? Well, I always have a sketchbook, so I drew my mom. And yeah, the call bell was both a metaphor and the reality of the neglect. And it was only while I was writing the book that I understood alarm fatigue is a thing. And that I understood, oh, my mother's a heavy ringer. And they can tune her out because, 99 times out of 100, she really doesn't need anything except for attention, which nursing homes do not give. They are not staffed for that. So, but she's a human. It just seems so wrong that your elder years might be doomed to be lived in isolation no matter where you are.
Yeah. Well, the solution it's interesting. It's like something you might figure out through a graphic recording or graphic facilitation process. It's common sense. The solution was to have routine check-ins.
Yes, yes. And I wanted to show that that was something that when I worked in the hospital system and we went through that strategic, and it was like one of the is we can't change the system unless we, and we just have to pay more attention. There are these simple solutions to some patient-centered care that doesn't break the budget. Technology-centered system right now, and compassion doesn't have to be that, although care is labor intensive. But after I left, after I took early retirement, the provincial government just changed, and then they came in, were very top heavy. They didn't want any of this touchy-feely circle conversations anymore. So it was back to the way it was, which is a shame, because I think even though that stuff might seem somewhat woo-woo, I think when you are speaking to people and allow them, no matter what their power level, to speak from their heart and to feel trusted and heard, I think there are all kinds of creative solutions. Anyway, that's my soapbox.
No, that's perfect. Well, to bring everything to a close, I know that there's going to be opportunities for you to continue to do your comics if you wish. Definitely in the world of graphic medicine. I think
Yeah.
of COVID Chronicles. I don't know if you saw that one, an anthology. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
showcase of folks basically working in that genre, the graphic medicine
Yeah.
comics.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it, but I did apply to be part of that. But I actually didn't have that direct experience with COVID. I was finishing the book during COVID, but yeah, I think I think right now I'm thinking what will arise. I don't know where next, but something will come up that wants me and that I'm energized by, and we'll probably know each other when we see each other. So something like that.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Susan, for doing this interview.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thank you for listening.